Ah, those bright college days.
Hey!
Frisbee on the quad, making new friends over philosophical discussions and pizza parties in your dorm. Wait. What? Who has time for Frisbee?
Hey!
These days, it's more like read on the bus from work to class and then stay up late working a second job while living with mom and dad. Just to pay tuition. And then after you graduate, well, hello there, giant student loan payment. Average tuition and fees around Texas have more than doubled since 2003. So, you're not alone if you've been wondering, why is college in Texas getting so expensive? To solve the case of rising tuition, the first thing you should know is that more students than ever are attending college. Between 2000 and 2017, the number of Texas students enrolled in higher education jumped by nearly 50%. Awesome! But the money universities get from the state hasn't matched pace. Let's take a step back and talk about how universities are funded in the first place. We spoke with Matthew Watkins from the Texas Tribune.
The state appropriates money raised through taxes and things like that, and sends that funding directly to the universities. The other main revenue stream is tuition, the money that the students who are attending the university pay to attend.
Taxes and tuition, the two main sources. Seems simple enough. So what's the problem?
If you look at just how much money is the state spending to higher education, they're spending more. But the difference is a per student basis. They're sending fewer dollars per student to universities than they did in the past. So as the state spends fewer dollars per student, the universities are making up for it by raising tuition.
And there you have it. The money universities get from the state just doesn't go as far anymore. And lawmakers are asking those who pay tuition to pick up the slack. In most states, the state legislature has to approve tuition increases. But Texas has done things a little differently. In 2003, Texas lawmakers transferred this power to the Board of Regents at the universities. This was called deregulation. But why would legislators give up such an important role?
The stated intention was to give universities more flexibility, more power to decide for their own how much they needed to charge individual students.
Voters don't love tuition hikes. Many think deregulation gave legislators an easy way to say, I didn't do it. That rubs some Texans the wrong way.
Critics of deregulation would say that one of the biggest problems there is the lack of accountability. The legislature, which used to set tuition, was elected, and if voters of the state thought that those tuition costs were too high, they could do something about it. They could write their state representative, they could vote that representative out. The boards of regents are appointed by the governor and are less responsive to voters. So there is an argument that there's less accountability.
But wait, deregulation isn't necessarily the culprit for rising tuition either. In fact, only 9 of the state's 38 four-year public institutions raised tuitions and fees at a higher rate after 2003 than they did in the decade before deregulation. So part of the picture is more students, more construction, and deregulation. But that still doesn't explain what we're seeing. Seriously, what is going on with rising college tuition? Let's break it down. Schools need to get money from somewhere, and they spend that money on lots of things. But it's not a perfect formula. In addition to taxes and tuition, the funding comes from places like grants and endowments. Funding depends on what type of school it is: research university, community college, medical school. Remember, in the past, schools got a lot of that money from the state. In fact, the Texas Constitution says the state will provide for the maintenance, support, and direction of a university of the first class. So, say in 1984, for every dollar spent on higher education, the state paid half. But by 2012, that had shrunk. For example, state funding went down to 22 cents per dollar at Texas A&M and to around 13 cents per dollar at UT Austin. Universities have to fill those holes in their budget somewhere. So they raise tuition. Overall, state funding dropped by $3,900 per student between 2000 and 2014. During that same period, tuition went up $3,200 per student. So help us out, legislature. Why can't we just find more funding for schools?
In Texas, taxes are just very unpopular, and people are always going to bristle at the idea of raising them. Another issue is in Texas, we don't have a state income tax, which means there's limited ways for the state to raise money from the taxpayers.
Taxes. So obviously, someone has to pay for schools. But asking who will or who should can get messy. Some people ask, why should taxpayers pay for this? After all, not all of them will have kids who go to Texas universities.
People argue that taxpayers should fund universities because everyone benefits from the strength of a good university. The universities bring jobs, they create research that helps national defense and improves technology. They create social mobility that helps people rise from poverty into the middle class.
But just as having an educated population benefits the whole state, having that education be unattainably expensive hurts the whole state too.
Texas, we're a state where a majority of students are in some kind of financial struggle. And if those students aren't able to become good workers, that's going to affect the workforce in Texas and possibly hurt the economy down the road. You've also just got students who are taking out a ton of student loans that's hurting them, for 20 years after they graduate. They're still having to pay off the debt that they incurred to go to college. It may still have been a good economic decision to have gone to school, but they're having to spend that money paying off loans instead of, making purchases that could boost the economy and grow the state.
Rising tuition, student loan debt. Ugh! This is a problem the entire country faces. But here in Texas, we have some important decisions to make. Who should be ponying up for those universities of the first class? Students and their families, or all taxpayers? One way or another, us Texans are paying for what we decide.